Hello and welcome to Radio Cataclysm, an audiobook podcast bringing you stories from the Zeck universe and beyond. I'm David Jewell, I write the Zeck series, an ongoing sci-fi fantasy adventure about deeply flawed people doing their best to survive in a world that won't stop ending but just keeps going. This podcast is a serialization of the audiobooks from that series. Season 1 covers the first volume, just called Zeck. In a world ruined by an expansionistic empire, a group of outcasts find themselves with unlikely allies in a fight for survival on the eve of another war. In a small town on the blasted tip of old Kentucky, just across the border from the eastern hinterlands, Zeck Strauss threw a furtive look over his shoulder before ducking into the Blue Coal Tavern. He didn't hear the clip-clop of the horse-drawn paddy wagon 2 streets over, nor see the electric bloodhound leading 2 masked figures in his direction. Zeck sidled up to the bar as only he could sidle. "Whiskey, neat, with a twist. 1 cherry, skin and stem only. Easy on the vermouth, pal." The bartender nodded. Zeck surveyed the tavern. The air was thick with cigarette smoke. Most of it came from 2 young boys at a table in the corner. They were sharing 1 cigarette at a time between them, one boy coughing and hacking up phlegm while the other puffed like a dragon. Then they switched. When they got down to the filter, they'd light another one off the cherry and keep going. In the opposite corner, an enormous hulk of a man drained beer after beer while his friend of average size studied a hand-drawn map, yellowed with age and burnt at one corner. The man with the map pointed at a place of interest and whispered something to his gigantic partner. The giant grunted, nodded, and downed another beer. The waitress brought him another tray with 6 full glasses and exchanged them for his empties. The only other patron of the Blue Coal Tavern was an old man in a wizard's cloak at the end of the bar. His drink was full, but most of the ice in it had melted. He was eating complimentary peanuts a few at a time and licking his fingers between each trip to the bowl. The bartender set Zeck's whiskey on the bar and tweaked his mustache 5 times to indicate the price. No sooner had Zeck reached into his satchel for his wallet, though, than 2 Churlian Imperial guards burst through the front door, guns drawn. The masks were in place on their helmets, complete with bulbous black eyes and sculpted chelicerae. One was a full head taller than the other. Both wore the bulky, mass-produced armor of the Empire's police force. Between them stood an electric bloodhound, its eyeless head turning to and fro as it sniffed the smoky air. "Freeze!" said the guards, their voices mechanically amplified by the mouthpieces in their masks. Everyone stopped what they were doing. The giant set down his 9th beer, only half empty. Like a magician doing sleight of hand, the other fellow rolled up the map and deftly stuck it up his sleeve. The boys in the corner set their cigarette, smoked nearly to the filter, in the ashtray. One of them looked equal parts relieved and nauseated. The ashtray was full of butts. They'd already smoked half the pack. The old man in the cloak dropped his peanuts back into the bowl. The taller guard holstered her gun and drew her scanner. "We are looking for 2 dangerous fugitives," she said. "They may have altered their appearance. We have tracked them across half of Kentucky. Our hound has scented their vehicle, but they have likely masked their own scents and changed their faces. We will perform a multi-spectrum scan on all denizens of this tavern." "Up against the wall," said the short guard, motioning with his gun. "Non-compliance is an implication of guilt and may result in immediate arrest or physical action taken against your person." The 2 boys looked to the waitress, panic in their eyes. She nodded at them and gave a reassuring smile. Then she and the bartender stood against the wall like prisoners waiting for the firing squad. The old man joined them. "You there," the short guard said to Zeck. "Leave the drink." Zeck took a furtive sip and set the glass on the bar before taking his place in the lineup. The giant's head nearly scraped the ceiling when he stood. His friend only came up to his nipples. One of the boys had turned a pale green and swayed a little on his feet, but he and the other youth took their place at the end of the line. Once everybody was against the wall, the guard with the scanner went down the line one by one. She held the scanner up to the waitress's face. A light flashed, shining through her skin and reflecting off of her skull. The scanner chimed. The guard moved on to the bartender. In the flash from the scanner, the bartender's titanium framework shone brightly through his silicone skin. The scanner chimed. Next were Zeck and the old man. Their skulls flashed normally, and the scanner chimed, but the guard paused for a moment before moving on from Zeck. The guard came to the beer-drinking giant. When the scanner flashed this time, instead of a skull, the giant's true face showed through his false skin. The scanner buzzed angrily. The short guard with the gun fired upon the giant, spraying him with tiny spiders that wove a thick web across his body in the blink of an eye, pinning him to the wall. But the strength of the webbing was no match for the drunk strength and sheer mass of the brute, and he tore right through it with a growl and a mighty belch. The guard pulled a lever on his gun and shot the giant with a debilitator. The $50-sized spider landed on the giant's neck and immediately skittered over to his carotid artery where it sank its fangs in. The giant swayed like a tree in a storm. He grabbed at the spider, but the venom worked swiftly. The giant collapsed onto the guard who'd shot him, pinning him to the floor. A number of things happened all at once then, so quickly and chaotically that Zeck was unable to extricate himself from the morass. The giant's map-reading friend grabbed for the holster of the guard who was still standing, but the guard was faster by a hair. She drew her gun and blasted the outlaw with weavers. In seconds, the man was encased in silk from head to toe. His shrouded form fell to the floor with a thump. The excitement was too much for the young boy with nicotine sickness, and he barfed right onto the guard's shoes. He and his friend soon found themselves plastered to the wall by spiderwebs, side by side. The guard was out of ammunition. Her short partner was still pinned underneath the giant, flailing his arms and struggling to free himself. The bartender and the waitress ran and sheltered behind the bar, leaving only Zeck and the old man in the wizard cloak standing in the open. The tall guard pulled an egg sack out of her belt and started to load it into the gun, but it stuck to her glove, creating a brief moment of vulnerability. The old man seized the opportunity. He produced a staff from a fold in his robes. The gem on the end glowed with an otherworldly light. The mage raised his hand and, in a voice that Zeck expected to rumble with power, but instead creaked like a rusty hinge, said, "Snake magic!" A garter snake appeared in the mage's hand. He seemed disappointed to see it, as if he'd expected a viper or a boa. He had no time to waste, though, so he threw the snake as hard as he could. It slapped gently against the guard's chest plate and fell to the floor, where it immediately slithered away. "Well, shit," was all the old man got out before the guard shot him with weavers, binding him in silk. "Bravo," said Zeck, clapping for emphasis. "Well handled." He walked backwards as he spoke, inching closer to the drink he'd left on the bar next to his satchel. "Halt," said the guard. She aimed her gun at Zeck. "Oh, I promise you, officer, I have no ill intentions. I merely require a stiff drink to calm my nerves after witnessing that display of bravery." Before the guard could object, Zeck picked up his drink and downed it in one gulp, cherry and all. "Put the glass down, slowly." Of course. Zeck obeyed. The guard drew her scanner, holding it in her left hand even while she kept her gun trained on Zeck with her right. "Open your mouth." "Why do you have so many dental caps?" "Remove one, that's an order. I need to scan your teeth." "Oh, that won't be necessary. Clearly you have your men. The fellow who attempted to acquire your firearm is in league with the fugitive giant who your partner is currently restraining on the floor. Before you arrived, they were carousing and reading maps together, no doubt planning their escape from justice. Of course, they underestimated your speed and skill. The friendly bartender here can vouch for my innocence. I'm a mere bystander. I'm simply passing through town, and I stopped in for a tipple." Wrong place at the wrong time. The bartender stood up from his hiding place behind the bar. He looked at Zeck, looked at the empty glass on the bar, looked at the guard. He opened his mouth, but instead of the friendly chime Zeck was expecting, the bartender let out a series of loud buzzes, followed by a short siren and 5 tugs of his mustache. "Well, I'm no thief," Zeck said. "I was in the process of retrieving my wallet when these public servants interrupted us with a far more pressing matter. Now that their quarry is subdued, I'll gladly pay for the drink." He pulled something from his satchel. "Freeze!" the guard shouted. She shot Zeck with a blast of weavers. The thick webbing pinned his arms to his sides. The 11 decibel acoustic laser slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor. The weavers continued their work, soon wrapping his legs together and covering his head like a hood. The world went dark and silent. Hey, it's me again. Thanks for listening. Fun fact, the Blue Coal Tavern was named for a sponsor of the old Shadow radio shows. This company in Pennsylvania used to spray their coal with blue dye as some kind of weird branding campaign. I used to listen to the Shadow with my dad, and I was always fascinated by the commercials for clean-burning anthracite, whatever that means. Hey, if you like the show, you can subscribe wherever you get podcasts. If you'd like to get new episodes a week early, you can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/radiocataclysm. There you'll also find microfiction in the show notes, adding little bits of lore and side stories that you can't get anywhere else. If you'd like to read along or just prefer text over audio, the text version of this story is available at whatnotetc.com. That's whatnotetc.com. And of course, you'll find that a week early over on Patreon as well. The book itself is available in paperback, ebook, and audio, and there are links to all of that in the show notes. Until next time.